What's up, YouTubers? Right now, I'm in the capital in Guatemala City. There's a lot of traffic going on outside. I'm in kind of a cheaper hotel tonight, so you're probably going to hear a lot of noise in the background. So there's not much I can do about that, but just so you know, there's noise in the background. Right now, I'm in Hotel Taipei. If you happen to be in the capital of Guatemala, it's a place where you can get a room with a bathroom for like it's 95Q. I'm not sure. That's a little over $12, I think. Anyways, most hotels in the city, if you want a private bathroom, going to cost you closer to 30, $35. You can get shared bathrooms for 20, 25, $30 too. But to me, that's a little bit too much to pay when you can just come to the Taipei. Anyways, I got a viewer question. It's a younger person. I'm not sure how you say his name, or if it's he. I'm pretty sure it's a he. Kasun, I think. He asked me, what's the best place to be a digital nomad and get residency and live on $500 or $600 a month and have high speed internet? Now, I'm smiling because the high speed internet, that's kind of the easy part of the hard part to answer. Whether you're in Southeast Asia or whether you're in Latin America, the internet is not super fast, but it can be. So, for example, if you're in a big city and if you're in a nicer neighborhood, you could get DSL or get something to your house that can be pretty fast. And if you're in the capital here in Guatemala, you can get internet that's actually pretty fast and actually pretty cheap too. But that's not an easy question to ask because it really depends on what neighborhood you're in, what city or town. Then it also depends on which service you're getting. But in general, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, they all have pretty high speed internet. I'm a trader. I don't need super high internet. I need reliable internet, but I don't need super fast. So that's kind of subjective question. But in general, you can get 10 megs all over Guatemala. Between 5 and 10. 10 is going to cost you more. You can get higher, but it just depends if you're in the capital, what neighborhood you're in, and if you're willing to pay. So on with that said, another reason it's a difficult question to answer this is it really depends. You can live all over in Latin America pretty cheap for $500 or $600. I'm going to assume the viewer has probably more than that to spend. He probably wants to stack up some money and save some money. But most residencies in general, you have to have an income requirement. But there's exceptions to that. Like one is Guatemala. If you get a temporary residency, there's no income requirements, and then after 1 year and a month, you can apply for a permanent residency, and you don't need any income requirements. Now, if you want a permanent residency right away and you're willing to start a business for $50K and provide a business outline, that's different. You can just get permanent residency right off the bat. But once you get permanent residency in Guatemala, you only have a 5-year wait. Actually, it's a little less. 5 years, then you can apply for the passport, but you can apply for it actually before 5 years is up. That's just a general overview, but the reason I say it's complicated because it really depends. Now, can you live in Guatemala for $500 or $600? I would say yes. You can live in like the lake area. You can even live in Chile. I'll just give you an example. My apartment's in Chile. It's basically a one-bedroom apartment. It was fully furnished. It's about $250, $260, just depending on what the exchange rate is. You can get apartments in that building for about $200 to maybe $160, $170. Now everything's included in that price. Now with those kind of apartments, everything's included. But if you get a cheaper apartment, which you can get cheaper apartments for $150, but you're gonna have to furnish them and then pay for your own utilities. In this apartment that I have, in Chile, all that's included except for the gas you buy for your stove. It's like a little propane tank, about 20 gallon or 20 gallon tank. But I spend less than $600 every month, and it's easy. Like if you don't, excuse me, if you don't hang out in bars, if you don't party a lot, it's going to be hard to spend $600. But if you do, you can go over $500 or $600 pretty easy. But if you don't drink out too often, if you have your parties at your house, invite your guests over there, you can live within that pretty easy. Now up on the lake, you can get apartments for $50 on up. I had a place up there for like 250 when I first moved down. I didn't like the lake area, but there's all kinds of places, all kinds of choices. In Chile, you have a lot of apartment choices for like 150 to 200. Those will either be rooms or they'll be actual apartments, no shared bathroom or anything. And if you rent a room, everything comes with it. If some of these apartments, you can get everything in it, including all the utilities except for like the gas you're going to pay for. And I spent a couple bucks on water, whatever that is. You get 5 gallon water things. But other than that, it's kind of nice because all your expenses are included in that. So for your 150 to 250, I pay 250, but you know what that's going to be, and then you just have the rest spent on food, beer, whatever. Um, Maybe going out on the weekends if you can budget for that. Now, when I include the $600, I'm not including like traveling on the weekends, which in general I don't do when I'm working. But when I get up, when I make a certain amount of money, then I'll go travel or whatever. Now, so the first choice would be Guatemala. It's not necessarily the best. It's just one choice you have where you don't have to prove any income. Another choice could be Paraguay. And Paraguay, just before I get off that, if you're from any of the major first world countries in Asia or in Europe or United States, you can just pay a lawyer $1,500 to set this up, and then for your permanent residency, it'll be about $1,800 or 1,750 USD, depending on what the exchange rate. That can go up or down, and also too, Guatemala may raise their rates. Now, $500 of the $1,500 is the tax you have to pay for the temporary, and then $750 is the tax you pay for the permanent residency. The rest would just go to your lawyer. Now, having said all that, other people have found cheaper lawyers, and other people have tried to do it themselves or found fixers, so it can be done cheaper. It's just I prefer to do a lawyer that knows what they're doing, because some of these lawyers will cut corners. And if you don't have all the proper paperwork when you apply for your naturalization, sure, you'll be in the computer, sure, you'll have that residency, but when you want to apply for that naturalization, you have to have the original receipts of the taxes you paid, else you're not going to get it. Some lawyers are famous for like bribing people and putting your name in the computer without you paying the tax. So make sure if you do it yourself, or make sure if you have someone else, you have to have those hard copy pieces of paper. You can't have certified. You have to have the original copies of all that. And I just prefer save up the money, pay for a lawyer, and then it's all pretty smooth. Now coming to Paraguay. Paraguay is really cheap to live in too, but it's in South America. And one of the downsides there is it's hard to eventually get the passport. Now you can get the residency. It's pretty easy. You just pay. I can't remember what the fees are, but 2,000 or 3,000 depending if you do it yourself and you have the lawyer, and you have to deposit five to 6,000 depending on the exchange rate to a bank account. Then you can just live there, but you may not get the passport unless you live there. A lot of people just live there like as a resident, but then fly out of the country. Uh, Sometimes the government looks at that and may not give you the passport. But if you actually live there and stay there, you have a higher chance of getting that passport. But because it's in South America and because it's far away from North America, it's not necessarily the best bet. But if you don't have a steady income, or you don't want to, you don't want to have an income you prove to the government for whatever reasons, maybe your income is invisible if for some reason you don't want that information going out to people you don't want it to go out to, then another option would be, like I said, Guatemala. Another could be Paraguay, but you may not get the passport. But where you can get a passport in really a short amount of time, it's 2 years. It's Peru. Now in Peru, you can apply for the education visa or the working visa. But if you get the education visa and you pay your tuition, you go to school there, you can get a passport in about 2 years. Now, with all the processing, it may take a little over 2 years to get your actual passport, but this one's a little tricky. You'll have to get your paperwork. You may not really need a lawyer to do this. Usually the school will help you fill out all the paperwork to make sure you have a legal residency there. But you're going to have to have a bank account with 5 or 10 grand in it. You need a certain amount of money to prove to them that you can live there. You don't have to have income. You don't have to prove any income, but you do have to have a bank account to show them you have the resources to live there. But other than that, you have to show that you can pay for your tuition. And I think you have to have a birth certificate, but I can't remember. But the schools will tell you all this. You basically have to be willing to either pay the tuition and put in the 2 years time, and then after the end of the 2 years, you apply for your passport. The cool thing about that is there's not a lot of high lawyer fees, but you have to be willing to pay for the tuition. What another way you could do it is you can just get a job teaching English. I do believe you have to teach English full time there to get the visa to live there. But again, it's like the education visa. After 2 years of working there, you can apply for a passport. And their taxes are pretty cheap. It can be low cost living, but the capital in Lima is kind of expensive. So that's another option. Another option that's not super cheap to live would be Chile. I'm just including that in there just for people who are young, who want to get a passport quick. In Chile, you only have to work, I can't remember, it's 12 or 16 hours a week to get the permanent visa. But what you have to do is you have to go down there, apply for a job, find a school that will teach you on the books where you're going to be paying tax. I believe the tax is about 10% there, but if you work about 20 hours a week and you get a contract for 2 years, you'll be able to qualify for that passport, and you also be able to qualify for the permanent residency too. Now, it's very expensive to live in Santiago in Chile, but if you teach English part-time and you have some online income, that may be a way to live there cheap. But the cost of living is kind of high. Apartments are going to run you $500 or $600 at the low end, so it's not exactly cheap. But if you want more of a first world lifestyle and you're pretty young and you don't mind living like a college student for a while, and you can hustle online and you can work a part-time job to get your residency, you could do that. The only other way you can do it is if you're willing to invest $100,000. In the past, you had to be willing to show like $100,000 in assets to get the visa. Now, there were exceptions to that. I don't know if it's still like that anymore, but I just put that in there for people, young people who don't mind the high cost of living and have an additional income like an online income. Okay, I covered Peru, Paraguay, and Guatemala. Now, to me, the best option is Guatemala because you just get the temporary resident, and all you have to do is come down with a passport, a criminal background check, and just pay the lawyer to process your papers, and then get your temporary. And after a temporary resident, you get your permanent. It's pretty smooth. It's pretty easy. So if you can save up the money to just pay for a lawyer, and assuming you don't have a bad background, you haven't committed any crimes in whatever country you're from, you can do that. Now, you could go to Southeast Asia, but it's really, really difficult to get citizenship in Thailand and Japan. I know a few people, but it's really, really difficult. Offhand, I can't think of anywhere in Asia that's really easy. One place you can go is Cambodia. You can live there on a business visa, but it's pretty much impossible to get a passport there. I think even if you marry a local, you can't really get a passport. But I may be wrong, but that's what some other expats told me. So other than those few places I mentioned, those would be the easiest. Mexico isn't really hard, but it's kind of like Peru in that you have to get the education visa, pay the tuition, and I know it's such a personal decision. Like I really like Mexico. I could make it work myself. I just prefer to live in Guatemala, but I want to comment on El Salvador and Honduras, but in general, I think you have to have an income. I might be wrong. Trying to remember. I can't remember that. I just won't comment. But anyways, in Central America, Guatemala, then in Panama, if you're willing to put 5 or 10K into a business, you have to set up an SI corporation and then put the money in a bank account. But I don't like that option because I've heard through lawyers that many Americans and Europeans who use that or who are planning to get citizenship that way probably won't get their citizenship. They're probably not going to, because they've already changed the rules in the middle of the process. That's why I say that. So the odds are, unless you really, really run a business there, it's not a good option. And the fees in Panama can be more than $5,000. I'm talking about the lawyer fees. I'm talking about all the other fees you have to pay the government, and that's what I mean. They keep raising these fees, and changing the rules in the middle of the process. So that's why I don't really recommend Panama. But international living and a few other places used to promote that. But I personally know one guy who did that route, and he still hasn't gotten citizenship. He's paid a lot of money in lawyer fees. He's got a separate company, and he still hasn't really got what he wanted. So um, that's why I don't really recommend Panama. But for people who are on a tight budget, I would suggest first Guatemala. If you want to be in South America, I would suggest Peru or Paraguay. But I suggest Peru if you want to work, because you can make 12 to 15 bucks an hour teaching English, part time or full time, and there's a lot of jobs. Let's just say 10 bucks an hour. You can make more than that, but if you work for a local school, you can make at least 10 to 12 pretty easy. And then you can teach English online to Chinese students for like 18 on up. And then if you have other additional incomes online that doesn't take a lot of time, and you want to be in South America. South America is really quick. It's a 2-year process. And if you like Lima, you like the capital, you probably like there. But if you don't, and if you have your own education visa, you can transfer probably to one of the smaller towns, which is a lot better, depending on whether you like big city life or not. But Peru is the quickest and fastest, and it's cheap considering the fact that you can live cheap there, but the capital is kind of expensive. Some people just prefer $300 to $500 apartment. Now, I'm perfectly aware of places in central Lima where you can get apartments for like 150, 200. And there's a lot of selection just under 200, like 150, 160. So I just want to put that out there. So it just depends. It's such a personal thing. If you don't mind waiting, I would say Guatemala. But it's a slower lifestyle here. If you prefer a fast-paced lifestyle and you're a younger person and you like the big city, Lima might be your best bet because you can get residency and you can get a passport really fast. And whether it's a Guatemalan passport or Peruvian passport, you can travel vis-a-vis to most of Europe, at least Western Europe. Eastern Europe is a little bit more tricky. You can fly into Germany, England, wherever, relatively with no visa. Usually they let you fly in there, most of those countries, for 30 days, some 60. Spain is 90. You can stay in Spain up to 90 days on a Guatemalan passport or a Peruvian passport. So that's why I kind of mention all this. So you just have to weigh those, like how much money do you have to spend. Like if you're on a really tight budget, you can live all over Guatemala really cheap. If you're on a tight budget and you don't mind getting the education visa in Peru, and you want to move to a smaller town, you might like that better because it's much faster. But it's hard to earn a living offline unless you're in the capital, Lima. But if you have an online income and you have digital income, then it doesn't really matter in that sense. But for really cheap, there's really only 2 countries that are easy that I know of, and that's Peru and Guatemala. And then, like I say, I throw Mexico in there because you can do that too, but it's really complicated and you got to do a lot of paperwork, and but it may be worth it to you. And then the other thing is subjective as far as the internet. It just really depends in Latin America where you live. If you live in a big city in a nice neighborhood, I'm only making a generalization, but you'll get faster internet. Like if you're in Guatemala and you're up on a lake, it's slower internet, but it's not that slow. Just want to put this, I mean, it's not super slow. And then there's if you come to the capital, you can buy yourself it's like a router, and you can take it anywhere in Guatemala. Now you got to be in the bigger cities for this work. If you're out in the boondocks or too far out into the boondocks, it's not super fast. But you just plug it in wherever you live in Guatemala, and it's actually pretty high speed internet. And it's about 20 or 30 bucks a month, and it costs like 120, I think, for the actual device. So if you're willing to do that, that's another thing. I don't know about other places in Latin America, but as these kinds of devices become more popular in the States and even down here, your internet costs are going down and the internet's going to be faster. So I would just say in general, you just have to come down here, find a neighborhood you like, and try out the internet and ask around. Just an example, here we have at least three internet providers, and then we have Diequis, which is a 4th one, but they're not in the whole of Guatemala, I don't think. You have Claro, you have Movistar, you have Tigo, all pretty good. But the Movistar is the one where you can buy the device for 120 bucks, and you can take it anywhere in Guatemala. As long as you're in kind of close to bigger cities, it works really well and really fast. Um, and it's really not hard to get. You don't really have to have residence in it. You just go in there and pay for it. So other than that, I don't have too much else to say. If I can think of another country, I'll let you know. Well, there's Belize, but Belize is, you usually have to have more than $2,000 a month income to get a visa or to get residency there, and it's really a high cost of living if you live on the islands. If you don't live on the islands, it's a lower cost of living, but it's not as safe as the islands. El Salvador and Honduras, um, I don't think you can get temporary. I'll have to find that out. I'll try to ask around, but I think you have to have a pretty maybe 1,500, 1,200, 1,500 income to get the visa there. But here, 100% in Guatemala, you don't have to have any income, prove any income. You just have to have a police or a background check. And then when you apply for your permanent residency, you have to have a background check in Guatemala, assuming you didn't do anything wrong here. You just get it. Then you just wait out the 5 years. In Peru, you just have to show you have enough money to pay your expenses and pay your tuition, or you have to have a company sponsor you and go that way. But most people I know just get the education visa, and then they just work on that. They study and then they work and all that kind of stuff. Then after the 2 years, they got the passport. I know at least 3 people have done that. So, anyways, that's the deal on what I know about Latin America getting a residency that leads to a passport. And the high-speed internet, that's just hit or miss. It just depends. And every year it's getting better. Anyways, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you.